Hi, everyone. Is everyone still awake? Let's do this. So my name is Letícia. I am here to talk to you today with a skin of business, because I come from business. And what I will attempt to do, and I say attempt because honestly the future is not something set, it's something that we build together and we imagine together, is to bridge the gap between what has been happening in the world and what we see as influences from our culture and how that translates as a market strategy and also as influences in the data visualization field, which is a field that has been expanding in the last, I would say, with very, very strongly 5 years. So let's dig in. So as I said, I come from business, actually. I come from business school. And I have, but I also own a master's in data and design. I moved to Spain from Brazil 4 years ago, and I have a company that's called Odd Data and Design Studio that is both in Brazil and Spain. But before that, one of the things that I worked mostly with was implementing data strategy and data culture into companies, in big companies. And regardless of the company I went, or regardless of the studios and the spaces I've been, I would always go to the same type of format. So I would always use the same approaches of showing information on a dashboard that all come from, in a sense or another, if you think about it, how we used to work with industrial KPIs. And but sometimes we would experiment with different things, such as, for example, physicalization. But honestly, it wouldn't change much. I would even work with processes and transforming whole cultures and whole companies, like the one you're seeing here, which is our version of Decathlon, if you think about it, which is called Centauro, where we implemented a huge data culture. But eventually, I started questioning this format, and if this was the best approach for us to actually show information and to actually persuade people into taking more decisions. And what I realized at some point is that when you're looking at data and when you're trying to understand data from any perspective that you come, but specifically from a business perspective, it's not only about decision making, it's also about all of the other things related to starting conversations. It's also about how you're going to be monitoring information and how you're going to be implementing or even taking new insights. And if we get outside of business, we actually get into a culture in a space where we're talking to people that don't have any literacy. So my colleagues here have talked a little bit about how they have implemented this in business, how we implement this for people that have low accessibility or any type of other difficulty. I'm going to try to attempt to talk at a broader scale, how we can talk to different stakeholders. Because what happened to me was, at some point, I was at a table discussing how we could reimagine data in health for the Brazilian Ministry of Health, Indian Biochemistry Ministry, and also African countries with the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, with all of these other countries as well, to think about how we can design solutions for impact and for social impact. So our company goes from data to action, and action, as I said, can be many, many things, but we go through both analysis, visualizations, and we have been thinking and trying to translate what we think sometimes is very logical, but for us, in a sense or another, is very intangible, which are human needs and human translation, into many different things. So as you can see here, we have from very traditional Power BI outlets, but also to more exploratory and more interactive ways of visualizing and consuming data and information. And I think that this has given me this unique perspective of how our world is changing and how we can adapt new formats and new way to communicate to broader audiences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few zeitgeists or a few ways that we see and we interpret the world into what is happening into the data visualization field, which is expanding a lot. So if you don't know Matt Klein is a researcher in market and marketing specifically. And what he does is that yearly, he has this reports that he analyzes. So he has more than 70 reports that he takes, the most important ones. And what he does is he categorizes all of them. He analyzes all of them based on words, so word embedding. And then what he does is he creates this mega trends based on the main domains and the main words that have been selected through this beautifully processed work that he does, and he calls this an effective balance for distillation and provocation. And one of the things that we have been seeing about trends is, first of all, that we are going through a problem in imagination. So we have been having a problem with imagination globally, and that is because after the pandemic specifically and with the climate emergency, we are all a little bit tired. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So in a sense or another, we're less risky. And this means that trends have been kind of similar all around. Let me just say boring in a sense or another. But what we have been realizing as well is that this timing to market that we have been putting up, 365 days for a trend, does not really exist. Like, a trend does not go away in 365 days. It stays for longer or shorter times. And people are tired of them. I know you're all tired of them, but in a way or another, culture influences what we do. So I'm going to attempt at bringing 5 trends here to you today, and we're going to talk about how that is changing and how that is influenced the way that we communicate with data. So the first one is global burnout. We're all tired, especially younger generations are tired because we're constantly being shown information. This is from the lack of control or progress that we are seeing, the loneliness that we are facing, and what we are calling infobesity or infotoxicity. And it brings human needs to us, which means that we all are looking a little bit for stability. We're all looking for a little bit of faith, and we all want a time to breathe. So this means that in data visualization and data representation, which goes beyond data visualization, everyone is competing for your user's attention, including you and your data. So sometimes when you're trying to talk to audiences that are not as literate, meaning they do not understand, they do not read, or they are not really scientists or minimally analysts that could understand a little bit of data, or they were not taught in that, they have a hard time understanding what a chart is. So this means that we have been using other methods to try to fight that. So the first of them would definitely be interactivity. The second one would be new short ways of narrative. And we have seen some examples here with Rita that she showed, and formats that we call scrollytelling. You've probably seen them in newspapers. And we have been experiencing more in immersive data visualization. So just to give you a few examples here, the first one you're going to see, it's a very simple one that it's not really related about data, but it's more about information. And it's basically a flow chart that goes through all of the questions when someone is still a little bit reluctant in understanding that climate emergency exists. So he goes through all of the questions and all of the different ways and opening paths for you to counter-argument your own arguments in a sense. The second one is a short website, and it's a website that we launched last week in Brazil. It's called, it's analyzing how artificial intelligence is impacting the lives of Brazilians. And what we did was, instead of creating this huge website selling all of the data, we created a website that mimics how Instagram or how social media works, where you'd scroll through the different discoveries that you have vertically, but you could also deep dive into them by scrolling left. So this is one way for you to convey enough information and for people to go over it, but at the same time, not necessarily overflow your user if they want to. They can go into that rabbit hole, and that's a way to grab their attention. And finally, the last one is an example from a company called Field.io. We also do some experimenting with immersive data viz, and this is going into the AR and VR realm, where we're seeing why not, instead of just showing information, we can actually put that person into the reality and have them explore it further, because honestly, one of the things that we have been doing is sometimes just translating the 2D thing that we're doing outside to the 2D thing inside in dashboards. And that doesn't really make sense. VR and AR are here to expand our possibilities within data exploration. The second one, if you haven't guessed it yet, there's going to be one about AI. I mean, have you seen the amount of talks we have here about AI? So we are going through a period that's called AI colonization. Everything is AI-centered, everything is AI discussion. But this actually drives us to a point where we have access to things, and that is great in data visualization because people that are not programmers or designers that are trying to get into the field will have access to doing things no code. And also, it brings this space for novelty and acceleration and scalability. So when we're talking about AI colonization for data representation, we have data visualization going to be placed at scale, inclusivity, and accessibility, as Rita just showed us, and possibly new reaches for audiences and data visitors. So we're going to have no-code tools, tools that don't require a lot of programming. We're definitely going to be translating what we see on screen first in text, but in many other ways. So I'm calling that AI insights somehow. AI kind of started Midjourney and all of these other OpenAI LLMs started like that. So we started having tasks translated from image. We're going to do the other way around as well. And of course, accessibility. So someone said, we need to compromise. I don't think so. I think we need to use technology to make accessibility something simpler to implement and something faster for us to implement. So this is not a question of if, but it's a question of when. And how can we make it faster and scalable? And of course, I think that we need to start talking about UI and UX, or user interaction and user interface and experience beyond what we have as the chat interaction. Honestly, we all know that the chat works really well. We know that it's something that we do, but can we go beyond that? And can we explore different ways of using AI in data visualization that are not just text-based conversations? The third one is one of my favorites, I would say. It's called the human touch. So we are all hanging and needing this, we're all feeling this isolation somehow, and we're all really remote and fatigued somehow for screens. So we're longing for this type of interaction again. We had so many in-person events this year coming back, way more than last year if you think about it, and it's because we need this human touch. So for human needs, we go through looking at what so represents, looking at empathy, and looking at intimacy. And in data representation, that means that we have this need to experience data away from the screens, accepting that data is not perfect. It can actually be imperfect. It can be small, but also getting to know who is behind the work. So we're talking here about what we call data physicalization, which is transforming what we see in the digital world into the physical world, where we can touch things, where we can sense them, but also access different audiences. We're talking about more handmade things and artistry, and I think that that is beautiful, and more small and personal data, and understanding that something that's small sometimes can be just as important and something that is big data. So here are two simple examples. The first one is an example from COVID, which was a huge mural that was in the UK, where people could put messages and hearts of all of the people that they have lost with COVID. And what I like about this project is that it's both collaborative. It was something that was done in the streets, and at the same time, it could convey really, really small data, but really big data if you would take a lot of steps back. And the second one, if you haven't seen it, and if you don't know what this is, I suggest that you take a look at Giorgia Lupi. She's the mother of what we call data humanism within the data visualization world, and she's an amazing designer that has put out this, this piece on the New York Times. She's going to win a bunch of awards for this piece, I'm certain. And she talks about her experience with long COVID. So she tracked down all of her symptoms and all of the days, and she made it into a beautiful interactive piece. But it's so personal, it's so touching, that actually makes you understand more about the story of what it is to live, what it is like to live with long COVID, even if you don't have any experience or if you don't have anyone close to you. So this personal touch to things and this human touch to things can really make you go further into something that is so complex and so difficult, but trying to translate it to broader audiences. Number 4 would be environmental vaporware. This means that we are going through this place where we actually are experiencing a boom into climate emergency. So honestly, sustainability reports suck, with all due respect. if anyone here does them. They are status quo, they are boring, some that have lots of data viz mistakes, and we are now going to have to report more financial and ESG data than ever before because it's becoming a law. So we're experiencing that both in Europe, both in Latin America, and in other places. We're going to have guidelines, we're going to have rules, but if we really want our company and your companies to be recognized for the efforts that they are doing for the planet, you will have to go beyond the sustainability report. And this means that there are a few things as, for example, low, if you haven't heard about it, but the internet is a sucker for energy. And when you do websites that require a lot of energy, you're consuming even more resources. So there's a movement called LOW, which is Low World Wide Web, which means that we find resources in design and in programming to diminish the amount of energy that we're using specifically for websites. The second one, of course, I cannot not talk about the recent, not so recent, but the report that came out from Apple this year, where they, in 5 minutes, conveyed all of the information that they needed from their sustainability report. Of course, you don't have to use the superstar to do it in your company as well. There are other ways of doing it, but this is accessible, this is simple, and this is data. And finally, we're going to see more and more data activism in the form of charts and in the form of data visualization, such as, for example, this, which is called the warming stripes from Edward Hawkins, who is a researcher in this area. He created this chart that shows how the world is getting warmer. And it's being used in so many different scenarios, such as this one, for example, who is literally sailing the world now. And finally, the last one is a need for creativity, a need for playtime, and a need for fun. So what we're doing now is we are looking for joy. We are looking for things that can slow down our anxiety, and we're looking for ways in which we can explore new frontiers, both in data representation and other fields. So this goes into expanding and experimenting on how we interact with data. So we talk about how we merge creativity and tech. We talk about we use sound for data, and we talk about how we use art in data. And here on the left, you are seeing an example from Refika Nadal, who is an artist that blends all of these things together, creative tech, AI, and images to create this beautiful project mapping. This is Casa Batlló in Barcelona, where I live. And he has done these beautiful presentations there, and he has these presentations all over the world. In the middle, you're seeing Contrapunct, which is a studio that plays around with fonts and sonification. So you have a font that interacts with sounds that come from outside, which brings a different perspective to your design, for example. And finally, you have Nina Lindell here talking about a massacre that happened. And she is showcasing that massacre, and she's showcasing that school shooting that happened in a way that is accessible to people, but also beautiful, touching, and with a lot of empathy through data, art, and exposition. I suggest you check all of these people work out. They are amazing. So trends, at the end of the day, may be boring, but they're also a reflection of our behavior and our culture. Some of them impact more, some of them impact less. And their representation is nothing more but a tool to influence behaviors and start conversations, as I said. So understanding what society is going through can give us a sense of remaining relevant in this field and also going beyond the normal chart. And then I would like to try to explain this to you in the last minute that I have into what we call the Bantu-Congo cycle of life, which is from a researcher from Africa called Dr. Fukiao. And he talks about how trends and things in life, they go through a birthing period, they mature, they shift, and then they are reborn. And this all depends, of course, on region, technology, maturity, economic, social issues that we're going through, and political events. But if you think about it, we all go through this cycle in our lifetimes, where we have the beginning, we have this place of growth, where we are at our peak in our adulthood, which symbolize aging, other days, and we all come to an end. But this also can present a new future bringing back your ancestry and also rethinking about it. And what I did was I tried to put all of them somehow within this. And I think that, for example, everything that we're talking about AI are still at its birth stages, especially in data visualization. We're going to see a lot of bad things before we see good things in this area. Everything that's related to merging tech and data, it's coming more to a mature space where we're being hired to do it in a really interesting level. We already are seeing shifts in new forms of narrative, proposing new ways of doing it, but it's also coming down a little bit, where we, of course, all of these other parts as data as brand reputation, interactivity, need to go through a shift if they want to and if they will remain relevant. So this is, for me, more than just choices of charts. It is a form of communication and it is a language. And as a language, of course, as we all know, we use text, and then suddenly we're using emojis, and now we're not anymore, because Gen Z, you know, we don't understand them, we're older, I don't know. But just like language, it is changing. And I invite you to expand your way of looking into data, especially information, because it is in constant movement. I am here throughout the day today, and I would love to take your questions. Thank you very much.